Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the Cecilia Strzyzowski. This story has been all over the media for the past 2 weeks, literally everywhere, on every possible outlet. I've already gotten dozens of messages asking me to talk about this, and I have to say, as you all know, I usually don't like to cover cases that are very recent because honestly, there usually isn't that much information. But when a case ends up with over 6,000 words in a script, I go for it. We have a ton of information. Something new comes out every few hours. It's under constant investigation. So we can definitely make a video about it. In fact, it's going to end up being pretty warm. Besides the fact that I've been asked to cover it several times, I feel like it's necessary to do these kinds of cases, mainly because when this happens, new information comes out every couple of minutes. Something new pops up and it just gets confusing because the journalists and the people sharing it are already talking as if everyone knows the background. So you want to jump in and try to understand what's going on, but you have no idea what they're talking about. So I decided to organize it as best as I could, and let's see what this story is all about. She was Cecilia Strzyzowski, a 28-year-old woman at the time of the events, who was born after her mother, Gloria, spent a long time undergoing fertility treatments, giving herself injections in order to have children. Once she got pregnant, 6 months later, Cecilia was born. And it was a miracle in many ways, because after waiting for her so long and her being born at 6 months, she was able to go home in good health. Cecilia was a very happy and cheerful person, a girl who, in many ways, helped her family. The example that comes to her mother's mind is when Gloria had to use a wheelchair after an accident. She needed to do rehabilitation, and for that, of course, she had to get up from the chair. Every time Gloria complained about getting up and walking, Cecilia would parody a famous scene from a movie, the one from Men of Honor, and she would shout, "Cook, I want my 12 steps." Gloria, remembering this, says that's how she was, I swear. She had a personality that made it impossible to spend 5 minutes with her without laughing. She was joy 24/7 and with a dark sense of humor. I think that if she were here right now, she'd even be making jokes about her own death. Her friends always considered her an excellent dancer. She practiced since she was a little girl, and as she got older, she wanted to become a dance teacher. Although she also dabbled in crafts, and together with her partner Cesar, who we'll talk about later, they had thought about signing up for graphic design classes, Cecilia was someone who did a lot of things. A woman eager to learn more. She wanted to learn basketball, to play the violin, to paint. She was taking a painting class, a sculpture class, another one in aesthetics, all according to her mother. One thing you can notice in photos of Cecilia, if you pay attention, is that she used to wear a necklace with a cross pendant hanging from her neck, showing her face. Cecilia was a Boca Juniors fan, and her dream was to meet Messi someday, and she also wanted to go to the next World Cup. Another dream she had was to meet Tinelli, to be a choreographer, and to work with him someday. Cecilia and her mother talked all the time. They had such a close relationship that, according to Gloria, they seemed more like friends. They messaged each other every day, told each other everything, and saw each other whenever they could. Now that we know a little about Cecilia, let's talk about the person who, at the time these events took place, was her partner, Cesar Sena. To really talk about him, we first have to look at his parents, Marcela Veronica Acuna and Emerenciano Sena, two people who actually have an autobiography, so we know a lot about them. Marcela was born in 1972 during the dictatorship of Agustin Llanos. She was the daughter of Inda Cruz Rocha, a homemaker, and Saul Acuna, a socialist lawyer and leftist activist who fought for human rights. At the Maria Auxiliadora School in Resistencia, she practiced judo and, according to her, even went on to win competitions, something her son Cesar would later pick up as an adult, practicing a different martial art. It was thanks to her father's activism that she also leaned toward socialism, participating in different groups, but all of this reached another level after she met the man who would become her future husband. When she met him, she already had a daughter who was born in the late 1990s, the result of a teenage pregnancy. The Venetian Sena came into her life when he went to speak up for neighbors who had lost their homes and belongings in a flood. It seems that ever since then, they haven't been apart. Now, despite being socialists and active on the left, the Acuna family was, without a doubt, a bit classist. They didn't like people like the Venetian, who came from a lower social class and blocked streets to protest. Even though Marcelo's family didn't approve of the relationship, they stayed together. And little by little, they became what they were until recently. Their presence in the streets made them more and more well-known. Loved by some, hated by others. The first pregnancy that Marcelo went through with Emerenciano ended in tragedy. She was gonna have an abortion because her life was at risk, but faced with this, they decided to run away from the clinic and try to have the baby anyway. They had the baby, but Marcelo developed a severe infection, and Aeneas, their first child, died just one day after being born. After going through that experience, they were sure they wanted to keep trying, and that's how Caesar came along. He was born in December 2023 and was nicknamed Cascatito by his family. After that, the new family moved to a house at 1460 Santa Maria de Oro Street. This house would become important in the future because it's where Cecilia Strzyzowski was never seen leaving again. Over the years, Marcela Acuna and Emerenciano Senna became popular and political figures. People recognized them. It got to the point that in 2008, Emerenciano Senna established a neighborhood named after himself, right there where they lived. In 2023, Marcela and Emerenciano were running for office in the El Frente Chaqueño party. Marcela Acuna was running for mayor of the city of Resistencia and Emerenciano for provincial deputy. Everything I'm telling you, of course, became part of the huge media scandal once Cecilia's case came to light. The fact that they were public figures, and even more so politicians, created this fear that they might get away with someone shady, and that Cecilia's case would end up going nowhere. By the end of October 2021, Cecilia and Cesar met on a dating app and started a relationship. The Sena family didn't approve of this couple, but we'll talk more about that a little later. According to Gloria, after getting married, Cecilia started to seem a bit sadder. She had stopped doing the things she liked, and the cafe she had opened wasn't doing well. She suggested to her daughter that she open a gym since that's what she liked. So they cleared out everything that was in the place before and were gonna set up a yoga and Reiki studio, along with a few other things. But suddenly, Cecilia mentioned a trip. So with this context, let's move on to the events. According to Cecilia's family, she and Cesar were going to travel all the way to Ushuaia. The reason was a job opportunity that Cesar's mother had gotten through her political connections. Actually, what they were gonna do wasn't move there right away, but rather sign the lease for the house they would live in and also figure out how to move their dogs there. This was what Cecilia's family understood was going to happen. They understood that everything was ready over there, that the trip was set, that they would take different flights to get to Ushuaia, and that afterward they would come back to finalize the move. So on Thursday, July 1st at night, Cecilia made a video call with her mom, Gloria Romero, where she told her that she was packing her bag to go on the trip, and that, on the other hand, her partner Cesar would be dropping off her dog so her mom could take care of her while they were away. She even gave her instructions on how to take care of the dog and feed her. After that video call with Cecilia, Gloria welcomed Cesar Sena into her home, who brought her the dog and some money so she could buy dog food while they were away on their trip. If everything I'm about to tell you is as the media says, then Cesar, in front of the victim's mother, was a pretty good actor, because at that moment, she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. She said she saw him happy and also believed that they were happy together. Although it would be hard to imagine that someone is planning to kill another person, you'd think at the very least they'd look a little nervous. Instead, he left the dog with her to take care of, as if nothing was going to happen in the coming weeks. Maybe this was just part of the distraction, or maybe he underestimated Cecilia's mother so much that he thought she wouldn't suspect anything, and that everything would go according to plan. Although, and I have to say this right now, we actually don't know if there was a plan. In the early hours of June 2nd, Cecilia wrote to her sister Angela, who is 26 years old. "Are you awake? We're heading south, and I wanted to say goodbye in case the plane goes down." Obviously, she was joking. Although Cecilia's mother says she was actually a little scared of the plane crashing. They talked a bit about airplane safety at that moment and said goodbye with an "I love you." This was the last conversation Angela had with her sister. That Friday at 9:15, Cecilia was seen for the last time on a security camera. She was entering Lucena's house. What there is no record of is the moment she left, because she never did. Lucena's trip began without her. The family visited different places for campaign events, and Cesar was seen in public without his partner. Since the investigation began, the prosecutor's office managed to get the personal company, the one Cecilia used for her cell phone, to release her phone records. The last signal from her cell phone was detected in the northern area of Resistencia, between Tres Horquetas and Tirol. It was at the scene of family's property, where there's a pig farm. That's where one of the most well-known theories about this case comes from. Cecilia didn't just disappear, she was allegedly crushed by one of the machines owned by this family. Around that time, between Saturday, June 3rd and Sunday, June 4th, Cesar Sena took part in 2 campaign events, since his mother was about to run in the upcoming elections for mayor of Resistencia, and his father was running for provincial deputy. At the first of these events, in the working-class neighborhood of Colonia Elisa, he was seen with some very noticeable marks on his neck. They look like scratches. Please, look at the screen if you're not already, because you need to see this. There are visible marks on his neck that appear to be fingernail scratches. Also, at first glance, it looks like they were made by something from right in front of him. Where did these injuries come from? They look like the mark of a hand scratching. When asked about it, Cesar Sena said he got these marks while practicing Aikido, a martial art. Between June 2nd and 6th, Gloria tried to get in touch with her daughter, who had stopped answering her voice messages and calls. Worried, she asked Cesar's family what was going on. The answer was that Cecilia's phone was broken. The situation was getting very strange, and Cecilia's family started to insist, until after a great aunt of the young woman spoke up, other answers started to come. Cesar said they had already arrived in Ushuaia, and that actually Cecilia was no longer with them. It turns out that, according to what he said, she had run off with a lover she had in Buenos Aires. That was the last response Cecilia's family received from the Sena family. It had been almost a week since her daughter had answered normally. According to Gloria, like I said, they were always in touch. Cecilia used to send her messages and memes all the time, but for the past few days, not only had she stopped sending photos, she also wasn't accepting calls or video calls. And Cesar's family kept giving answers that dodged the real reason why this was happening. One of the messages Gloria supposedly received from her daughter said that her phone had broken, and that she was going to take pictures with Cesar's phone and send them to her later. It was around this time that the final push to file a report happened. In this report, Gloria testifies as follows. I am here to report that yesterday, at around 8:30 p.m., while I was at home, 2 men showed up whose identities I do not know. They said that a person named Carlos, who works with my daughter Cecilia and lives in the Emerenciano Sena neighborhood, might know that something had been done to my daughter and that he was sure she was missing. That's why he asked for the family's contact information and came to my house. Right when the situation unfolded, when these 2 people arrived at her front door, Gloria contacted her daughter again through WhatsApp to tell her exactly what was going on, but the response she got back seemed unusually suspicious and way too strange to her. The chat said the following: I should tell you the truth. Also, along with this highly unusual and cryptic message, suddenly there was a specific truth she felt a pressing need to confront and ask Cesar about separately. She sent over several screenshots of her private chat with Cesar, whom she had clearly labeled and saved as my husband, just as you can see displayed right there at the very top of the screenshots. I'm gonna show you the screenshots and we'll read them together. As you can clearly see at the very beginning of all this, the person who would be Cesar appears, saying, "Come back, please." He sends her something from Facebook but asks her to come back. And on that same day, when she sends these screenshots, she sends all these messages to Cecilia's phone. Love, even if you don't talk to me, talk to your grandma. I assume she's talking about her great aunt who was there asking about her. I can't keep pretending I'm with you in a fake love story. Tell them the truth. Tell them you kicked me out and tell them who you're really with. I'm not gonna cover for you anymore. Your family is worried and wants to know what's going on. I'm giving you 1 hour. Answer me or I'll tell your family everything. If you don't want to be with me anymore, that's fine. I never bothered you about anything. I let you hit me. I left you my things. You asked for the bike, I gave it to you. You asked for the TVs and everything else, and I gave them to you. The only thing I asked you for was the store. And if I didn't ask you to stay, it's because you had already made up your mind and you hit me. My God, you had never hit me before. You'd never yelled those things at me. And if you don't want to tell your family that we're not together anymore, then tell them everything. That we got divorced, that you cheated on me. For those who don't know, gompiar is another way of saying to cheat. And that I cheated on you. That we had threesomes with other girls, and all the times you emotionally manipulated me into saying and doing things for you. Tell your family everything. Go ahead. It really hurts that you don't love me like you supposedly said you did. I told you, babe, you're hurting me. I told you we were falling apart. I tried to make things better. I gave you a month anniversary like you wanted. You told everyone I'm the villain, especially about Juan, especially that you cheated on me. It's important to pay attention to these messages because here they're trying to create a narrative that, of course, Cecilia left on her own, that the relationship was already a mess. Not only that, but also that she had hit him, that she was cheating on him, that they were separated, and that she was with someone else, that she was lying to the family. And that's really not the case, not at all. And so, after seeing all this and realizing that something was definitely wrong, Cecilia's great aunt and her mother filed a missing person report at one of the police stations in Resistencia. Right then, Cecilia's mother said that by that time, it had been 5 days since she had lost contact with her daughter. She stated that the last thing she knew was that her daughter was heading with Cesar Sena to his parents' house, since both of them were supposed to travel the next morning to the Corrientes airport, then make a stopover in Buenos Aires, and finally arrive in Ushuaia. A search operation was then launched with the involvement of Prosecutor's Office No. 4 of Resistencia, headed by Jorge Cáceres Oliveira. He ordered that the protocol for femicide cases be activated in parallel. By Wednesday, June 7th, as part of the investigation, Prosecutor Cáceres Oliveira requested reports on geolocation data, telephone companies, and social networks such as WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. That's exactly how the authorities were able to get the data showing where Cecilia's phone was, or rather, what its last known location was. On the other hand, anonymous testimonies were also collected. But one of the things that stood out most in this recent investigation was that, in reality, Cecilia hadn't even left the province. Her phone hadn't left the province. In fact, it was on a property owned by the Sena family. And the last camera that saw her did so right before she entered Cesar's family's house. In fact, she didn't even leave that house, at least not alive. Cesar Sena, his mother, and someone described as an assistant to the couple, who were social leaders, a woman named Fabiana Gonzalez, were called to testify as witnesses right at the beginning that day. So on Thursday, June 8th, these three people went to different police stations to give their statements. All of this happened while they were accompanied by activists who, of course, believed everything was fine, that these were just false accusations, but that wasn't the case. As soon as all this happened, it seems that the way Cesar Sena expressed himself immediately raised suspicions among the investigators. Apparently, his testimony had contradictions. As I've been telling you, since they're a very well-known family in Chaco, when Cesar came out, the press was already waiting outside so he could talk to them too. He said he was feeling a little unwell, that he had told the authorities everything he knew, and that they had treated him very well, that he had never been violent with anyone, and that if he had ever had a conflict, it was because he couldn't find a peaceful way out when dealing with people who were going to attack him. In fact, we have the interview. I want to show it to you. Let's go ahead and watch it. I think that for you to really understand what I felt, we need to step a little outside the usual format of the channel. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you an interview with Cesar Sena. It's one of the first interviews he gave right after testifying to the police. Because honestly, his reaction is priceless. You know how I always say we shouldn't judge how others grieve, that people react in different ways? For example, when something sad happens to me, I laugh, or I end up making jokes. That's just how I deal with things. Some people laugh nervously, some people have a hard time, in all sorts of ways. There are also people who sometimes show up in the media a little out of it. Maybe they're people who deal with these things through alcohol or other substances. But I feel like the reaction we're about to see here is nothing like any of that. Nothing like anything I've seen before that was genuine. I'm gonna stop talking now. Let's watch a bit of the interview with Cesar.
Like I told the officers, they can go. They can even move into my house if they want, so they can see everything.
The police saw everything they needed to, And in fact, as far as I know, the house was searched twice and more blood was found.
Check whatever you need. I gave them all the information I had, even her secrets, things I promised never to tell her family.
Well, this part here where he says she confided things in him and that he told the police and her family, even though he promised never to do so, is part of the narrative he wanted to create, maybe together with his family, because we still don't know for sure. But it's a narrative he wanted to build from the very beginning, from those WhatsApp messages he sent, if you remember. This whole thing about her having secrets and not wanting him to tell her family? All things he probably made up, because we have no certainty that those last messages actually came from Cecilia.
To be honest, I am just really worried something might happen to her, and that is all there is to it, really.
Do you have any idea?
It just feels so strange and so wrong that he smiles like that. It's personal, again, it's like we can't really judge this too much, but it's as if a smile slips out, you know what I mean? I feel like it's something I don't usually see in people who, have lost a child or a spouse, and maybe it has nothing to do with the case. Maybe they get sad, but they don't show it. Like, I never see this kind of little smile creeping in.
The media are saying that you come across as violent. Do you feel that way?
No.
Based on the testimonies obtained, the prosecutor asked the Cybercrime Division to extract footage from Thursday and Friday, June 1st and 2nd, from the areas mentioned by Senna and the other two women, in order to verify Cecilia's route, and also what the Senna family did before and after Cecilia disappeared. On June 9th, a police operation was carried out in which the Senna family's house was raided and 4 cars belonging to them were searched. In Marinciano, Marcela and Gonzalez were arrested. In addition, the court issued an international arrest warrant for Cesar. During that operation, around 6 million pesos were seized, found in 3 tool drawers with several bundles of 100 peso bills, as well as ammunition and bladed weapons, among other items of interest to the case. One of the things they want to determine is whether there are any properties, boats, or cars that belong to what is now being called the Senna clan. They also want to find out if there were any reports of suspicious transactions that were ignored. On the morning of June 10th, the prosecutor carried out a search and sweep at the family's home. There, the caretaker Gustavo Malgarejo and another person were arresting. It was during this sweep that an item was found which would give rise to one of the most famous and widely repeated theories about the case. On the property, bone fragments were found, that is, some bones and bloodstains. The fact that this happened on a rural property led the public, who were following the case minute by minute, to believe that she had been disposed of, that maybe they cut her up somehow and fed her to the pigs. This message was repeated on social media every day until the most recent discovery. People would say, "They're not going to find her, they fed her to the pigs." Although at this point, there was also the theory that she had been burned. Shortly after noon, Cesar Senna finally turned himself in at the 3rd precinct. On Sunday, June 11th, the operation continued at the country house. 2 other Sena family properties were also searched, and later that night, a home in the family's neighborhood was raided, where 2 vehicles were found. The prosecutor requested the arrest of Gustavo Obregon, Fabiana Gonzalez's husband, believing he might be connected to the case. At that time, very little was known, but thanks to security cameras, it was discovered that he could be involved. This man ended up being very important when it came to piecing together the Senna family's timeline and this case. But that wasn't the only breakthrough that day. At one of the Sena family's properties, around noon, forensic experts found burned and buried bone fragments. At first glance, the prosecutor ruled out that they were human remains. Although, as you'd expect from the news at that time, they initially avoided saying outright that they weren't human. Because of the magnitude of the case and its political repercussions, it was decided to form a special prosecutorial team made up of, in addition to Caceres, Chamber Prosecutor Jorge Fernando Gomez, and the head of Prosecutor's Office No. 5 in Resistencia, Nelia Velasquez. Another witness also testified, Magali Fernandez Laez. She's a member of the press team for the Morencia No Senna movement. She went to FM Golamba radio station to talk with former senior non-commissioned officer Gustavo Olivello. who is the host of the program Alerta Urbana. And there, she planned to voluntarily hand over her cell phone, which contained evidence that would further incriminate the Sena family, among others, in the possible femicide of Cecilia. According to her, she decided to turn in her phone out of fear and after alleged threats. But the problem was what happened next. In the middle of the radio interview, which was also being broadcast with cameras on social media, agents from the cybercrime department burst into the studio, who proceeded to seize the phone. Afterwards, the young woman left the radio station studio under police escort to testify before the prosecutor. By Tuesday, June 13th, the case was reclassified as femicide. It was no longer just a missing person case. This happened after new evidence came to light that hadn't been mentioned until then. From that point on, they believed that the Sena family or someone connected to them might have killed the young woman. While they were searching for Cecilia, it was noticed that there was a street in the Marinciano neighborhood that was unpaved, except for one single, fairly new square of pavement. Because of this, the search efforts were focused directly on that spot, suspecting it was a clumsy attempt to hide something. In fact, they tried to scan the area with ground-penetrating radar to see if there was anything underneath without having to tear everything up, but in the end, this didn't yield any results of interest to the case. There was nothing down there. Besides that, they were looking for remains of other people in case there were more deaths connected to the Sena clan. But apparently there aren't any. There don't seem to be any more human remains. And finally, it was confirmed that the bone fragments found were human. Even though it's not possible to tell if they belong to Cecilia due to the condition of the remains, we do know they're human, and that clears up several questions. With all the information we have and everything that was found, we can deduce that these remains are probably Cecilia's. After 1,400 pages of case files and 198 pieces of evidence, they were able to determine the time frame in which Cecilia was actually killed. This would have happened within a 48-minute window between 12:13 and 1:01. And from what we understand, the three most important members of the Sena family, Marinciano, Cesar, and Marcela, were present in the house from which Cecilia never left at the time of the murder. They also analyzed the computers and cell phones belonging to the Senas and found some very interesting things for the case. It seems that Cesar had plenty of time to sit down and search for things on the internet, and what he looked up or watched on YouTube exposes the whole case. It turned out there are a lot of criminals who don't realize that one of the first things investigators will check is their search history. Among the first things they found was a video about how to dislocate someone's arm. Based on this, it's believed he used his knowledge of martial arts to grab Cecilia from behind. As the days went by, he searched for things like, is this how these criminals reacted when they heard their sentence? Can a revolver use a silencer? He also looked up the following. What happens to the soul of a loved one who dies violently? Among many other things, he also searched violent deaths, what happens to the soul? Souls of murdered people? Mind of a killer? And he asked if a killer feels remorse. At the same time, while this is what Cesar was searching for in the days surrounding the crime, Cecilia was completely focused on something else. She was convinced she was going to see Buenos Aires for the first time since they had to make a stop over there, or at least that's what she thought. She was looking up information related to that, how to pack her suitcase, the best coffee in Buenos Aires, where to go, typical tourist stuff. She thought she was going on a trip, when in reality, there was no lodging. No lodging was waiting for them in Ushuaia. There were no plane tickets, nor the job that had been promised to her. The detainees began to be questioned. During the hearings, the identity of the only one of the 7 people under arrest, whose name had been unknown until then, came to light. It was Griselda Reynoso, the partner of the caretaker Malgarejo. The Sena couple was charged as co-authors of the crime of aggravated homicide due to the premeditated involvement of 2 or more people. The following morning, after the rounds of questioning, the court ordered new searches in a rural area of Puerto Tirol, the town where Menenciano Sana's ranch is located. At that point, they were already officially searching for remains or a body. On social media, a video started circulating that was recorded by Noelia Fernandez-Leyes. In that footage, the former press worker for the political organization led by the Sena family describes the terror she experienced. She was hooded and carrying a camera. She stood almost face first, so that her position was hidden, and said, "I don't want to know anything about what's being said. I just want to help clarify this. Emotionally, I am not well. My children are not with me. They are being kept safe in another place for security reasons." Very few people know where I am. My only security is a panic button, permanent protection, and security for my children. She also asked that her children not be left alone since she wasn't there at that moment to take care of them. She said, or rather, she clarified that she was not going to take her own life. All of this obviously implied that someone must have threatened her. On the other hand, attorney Juan Diaz, who had taken on the defense of Cesar Sena, resigned from his job due to irreconcilable differences. This happened after new evidence was added to the case file. The lawyer stated, "Today, evidence was added to the case file that prevents me from continuing to provide my services due to irreconcilable differences with the people I represent. I have my own principles, a professional ethic, which is why I am going to resign. My defense would not be effective." The evidence is extremely confidential in nature. The story the Sena family told started to fall apart little by little thanks to the investigation, although it's not very hard to figure out what happened. Cecilia was last seen alive on camera arriving at the Sena family's house, and a quick check with the airport showed that they hadn't even bought her a ticket to travel to Ushuaia, as they initially claimed they would. In other words, there were no plane tickets. She, her mother, and her family thought she was going on a trip. She was lured to the house. And in reality, the trip, of course, was taken by the Sena family. She was never part of the plan at all. That's exactly why this detail is so important. If things happened the way I'm telling you, if that's what really happened, it could mean this was a premeditated crime. Also, it was soon discovered that, in fact, Marcela didn't like Cecilia. She and Cesar had secretly gotten married on September 16th, 2022, and Marcela did everything she could to break them up. Cesar's family didn't like how they had met, that is, through a dating app, and the fact that there was about a 10-year age difference between them. So they actually got divorced 3 months later, and this was described as an extortionate divorce. Cesar himself said that the divorce happened after a financial settlement in which Cecilia would get cash. They say it was 400,000 pesos, a piece of land in the Merenciano neighborhood, that is his family's neighborhood, and capital to open a business, the Cafe O Gato Negro, which she opened and later didn't work out.
We make everything by hand. Chipa, croissants, pastries, cakes. Now, for Valentine's Day, we're making all kinds of chocolates. At night, we usually have homemade pizzas and some drinks and other things. Yeah, it's a place we started mainly for a younger crowd, but it ended up becoming more of a family spot.
Among those who were taken into custody was also Cesar's right-hand man, a man named Gustavo Obregon. So let's take a look, up to the moment I'm making this video, at the list of those detained and their possible connection to the case. Emerenciano, his wife Marcela Acuna, and their son Cesar Sena are accused of being co-perpetrators of the crime. Obregon and the couple who worked as caretakers at the ranch, Gustavo Malgarejo and Griselda Reynoso, are accused of being secondary participants. And Fabiana Gonzalez, Obregon's wife, and also an assistant to the Sena family, is considered a necessary participant in the crime. At this point, without a doubt, the most important statement is that of Gustavo Obregon. This, together with the statements from the other people involved, plus the security camera footage and the text messages, forms a narrative that we can now see clearly. So far, what we have is basically a summary of Obregon's statement, just to give us an idea. He said that he and Cesar, that is Cecilia's partner, left the ranch by car. He's referring to a place he calls La Curva. They leave the car there. He said that they got out of the car with small bags, and that each of them was carrying one. They went down a path, like a trail, that was next to the Rossi Ranch. That's how they get to the river, where Cesar takes one of the bags, opens it, and leaves the contents on the ground, right at the edge between the water and the shore. Finally, Cesar leaves both bags on the ground and sets them on fire with a lighter. This is where the cameras come into play to track and confirm the route that Cesar and Obregon took. Cesar Sena and Cecilia Strzyzowski checked into a motel in Resistencia at 3 a.m. on the day she disappeared. He left hours later, around 9 o'clock. From the motel, they headed towards Cesar's parents' house. They arrived at 9:30. Cecilia goes in with her partner and never comes out again. Her partner Cesar leaves 2 hours later with black bags, loads them into the truck, and drives off. Since then, Cecilia hasn't been seen again, and we still don't really know what he might have done to her or where each step took place. Cecilia is believed to have died inside Cesar's parents' house, and from there, in some way that still isn't clear. It's not entirely clear because it's part of the case and they're only telling us bits and pieces, but he supposedly took her to the place where the shredder is, out to the field. And from there, he allegedly left her remains in bags along this path that Obregon describes, and they supposedly burned all the evidence. According to the first unofficial reports, Obregon was then allegedly hired to clean up the scene. In the videos obtained from the security cameras, you can see him loading fuel together with Cesar in the bags. That fuel, which you can see them loading into the truck, is supposedly what they used to set fire to the bags containing Cecilia's alleged remains or her belongings. He said he went to the old house on the same Lucena property, and that he checked room by room with a flashlight because it was very dark. There, he discovered the body just as Marcella had described it. He said it was stiff and that it was difficult to place it in the truck. He also explained that Cesar suggested they go separately, that Obregon should go to the gas station to fill up with gas or fuel alone because there were a lot of security cameras. It wasn't convenient for them to be seen together. Obregon said that when they left, the fire they left behind was huge, a big, long-lasting fire that gave off a really bad smell. On June 6th, a few days after the first meeting in the field, Cesar showed up at a construction site where Obregon was working and told him to pick him up at his house because they had to go back to the field. So, sometime later, Obregon goes to the house where Cesar was. He gets in and together they go to the supermarket to buy trash bags. Also, Cesar asks him to tell the landlord to give him a big shovel. During all this, at one point, Cesar got out with a large black suitcase and burned it. When they finally arrived at the same field as before, the fire was still burning, which is strange, so it's believed that someone else had gone there to keep the fire going so it wouldn't go out. While Cesar was scooping up the remains of the ashes with the shoveled into the bags, Obregon was able to see small bones. On June 21st, just recently, Marcela Acuna distanced herself from the crime and said something that shocked everyone. According to her, she saw a body in her house, but she has nothing to do with the crime since she didn't kill anyone. Of course, that's something any of us would do. Don't tell me you don't often find bodies in your own homes. It's so common, why even bother reporting it to the police, right? She said she only saw her son Cesar again between 10:30 and 10:45 in the morning. He showed up with a scratch on his neck and on his chin. He explained to her that he had gotten into a fight with Cecilia. At that moment, they were somewhere with other people, so she decided not to ask him anything, and they went back together to the family home. When they got home, Marcela offered him some tea and to talk about the fight, and Cesar started to cry. He also asked her if he could go to a health operation that would take place in the afternoon during siesta time in Colonia Lisa. So she decided not to keep asking questions because she was afraid he might have an accident while driving since he was too nervous. After 4 p.m. on June 2nd, Marcela woke up from a nap and went to the kitchen to tidy up a bit. There, she noticed that there was a door left slightly open that really, they would never open themselves. She wanted to take a look, and without turning on any lights, she saw from her side a lump that she described as being about the size of a punching bag. She couldn't quite make out the color, but it seemed brown or gray to her. At the same time, it seemed to her that it was a body. She ran out of there scared, and just before she could process everything, Cesar told her to get in the truck. She was so nervous that she didn't say anything to him, but she sent a message to Obregon and told him to go check if what she had seen there was actually a body or not. While they were arriving in the town of Barranqueras, Marcela got confirmation that, in fact, what was behind that door was a body. But of course, the case had to blow up in the media for her to confess all of this. She's saying that she didn't see anything, that she didn't know any details about the fight, and that basically she has nothing to do with it. But also, between her and Obregon, they claim that Marcela didn't want Marenciano to find out, which is their way of saying that he had nothing to do with hiding the body. That's according to them, so it's also a question of whether you believe them or not. Although for now, I'm still looking for information, and Marenciano hasn't said anything. There aren't any chats, audio recordings, or any testimony that mentions him either. So the main players in all of this are actually the others. Keep in mind that throughout all of this, Marcela is portrayed as a matriarch. like the one who takes care of everything in the family, what people call the one who wears the pants. That's partly why she's accused of either planning the crime or covering it up. More than one person has pointed to Marcella as the one pulling the strings. She was accused, as we can hear in this audio, of making some families who lived in the Merenciano neighborhood disappear. Of course, it's important to note that the identity of the person in the audio is anonymous, and also, it's a pretty serious accusation to make people disappear. That's a much bigger issue. But to dig a little deeper into the accusations against Marcela Acuña, let's talk again about someone I mentioned 4 times before. Fabiana Gonzalez, the wife of Gustavo Obregon. Just a few days ago, Fabiana spent 3 hours giving a statement about what she saw on June 2nd. She was the family's assistant, and along with some other women, she was asked to clean everything up. Referring to the house where the crime is believed to have taken place, let's remember that in this place, the forensic team used luminol and found spots where blood had been cleaned up. The order to clean the place, according to what they say, came directly from Marcela Acuña herself. Fabiana said that on that day, she saw a body wrapped in a brown blanket inside a room, and she ran out. But she didn't tell the police anything at that time either. She was asked if she talked about it with her husband Obregon, who was involved in another part of the crime, specifically the concealment, the other part of the cleanup, but she said no. That same day, they had a big fight, and in fact, they hadn't been speaking to each other for some time, so none of this ever came to light between the two of them. Gloria, Cecilia's mother, said she doesn't believe Fabiana's whole story and finds it strange that she ran off in shock but didn't report it to the police. And while I completely understand that she must be in tremendous pain because of what these people did to her daughter, here I have to disagree. Because the reality is that throughout this whole story, we can see that there were a lot of people who were afraid of Lucena. There were rumors that people disappeared, and even Fabiana's husband was afraid of them. So it seems normal to me that she didn't want to say anything, because up until that point, at least on June 2nd, no one was covering the disappearance, and there was no police report. Once they arrested everyone, then they could finally talk. Still, these are just my thoughts, and maybe the plan to kill Cecilia had already extended to everyone who worked closely with the son of family. Still, people have pointed out the detail she gave about seeing a bundle wrapped in a brown blanket, which is similar to what Marcella said. Some think that the whole story might have been orchestrated by her herself. In all of this, there is definitely some truth, since some brown blankets were found and taken by the investigation team. Plus, they were found near the burned suitcase. Obregon recognized the blankets as the ones that covered Cecilia's body. Based on this testimony, the special prosecution team ordered police personnel from Chaco, specifically from the homicide, human trafficking, and highway patrol units, to conduct a search along the bed of the Trocadero River at the height of Campo Rossi and in the Quijano Canal, behind the Emerenciano Sena neighborhood. That is, very close to the family's pig farm. There, the forensic experts worked for more than 4 hours. During the search, they reportedly found what appeared to be crushed bone fragments, and among other items, a cross-shaped pendant. If you remember the beginning of the video, thank you. I mentioned earlier that Cecilia used to wear a chain with a cross-shaped pendant. Also, one of the first things said about this discovery was that the bones had to be large enough to conduct the necessary analysis. All of this, according to reports, would be analyzed at the Institute of Forensic Medicine and Sciences. Other belongings that were found were also sent, which included the remains of a suitcase, 2 rings, and a charred key. These were found on Sunday, June 18th, the same day that the primary elections took place in the province of Chaco. These burned items were found by the side of a street in the same Emerenciano neighborhood, thanks to a neighbor who called after finding these things. For those who don't know what the primaries are, basically they're like preliminary elections, let's put it that way, in which this family would have participated if it weren't for everything that happened. Since Cecilia and Cesar weren't allowed to be together, the couple lived in the house of Cecilia's great aunt. Even though, again, they weren't married anymore because they had divorced by order of the family, they were still together. Cecilia's great aunt is a woman named Mercedes Valois. They had been living there for about 5 or 6 months, just like any normal couple. They never broke up at any point. The great aunt allowed a TN interviewer to come into the house to get a better understanding of the situation. For this, I have to mention that when the case blew up in the media, Cesar's family denied that they even knew each other. Later, they denied that they had ever gotten married. And when the lie was exposed, when people responded with photos of the couple together at the courthouse and other places, they denied that they lived together. But of course, in the interview, you could clearly see that the place was lived in by a couple, and Cesar's clothes were in the closet. Not only that, there were still some flowers in the place, with a note from Cesar dedicating them for another month together. And this specific item was a gift he actually gave Cecilia only a mere 2 days before she supposedly left on her trip.
Now we just found out that the divorce certificate that exists is dated December of last year. We can't believe it. We didn't have that much communication with him. We questioned him 3 times. We told him to say what he knew because the family was being judged. Life with him. He denied it to us 3 times. Cecilia left my house. Security cameras will confirm it. There's one right out front. I didn't know that. I hope the truth comes out. All his clothes are there.
His own personal clothes.
His clothes?
They denied that he lived here. It's all right there. That bag up there is his clothes. Everything you see here is his clothes.
Jess.
There are also some of the girls' clothes here, too. This one belongs to the girl.
No. There's no date, but do you remember when he gave her this?
Yeah, about 3 days before leaving on the trip. Like I said, he always came with a bouquet of flowers or a box of chocolates or a tub of ice cream, but he never came empty-handed when he came back from downtown. No, he said once at a barbecue we had here that he knows how to make people disappear because if there's no body, there's no crime, and he was always carrying a gun.
There is no way to deny they were a couple. No way at all. Some people thought the note he left was a little strange. I'll read it to you here. But aside from that, he brought her flowers days before everything happened. 1 more month to the collection. I admire you for putting up with me. I thank you for loving me. I thank you for being my world. Here's some more adventures together. Mercedes also said that she herself had given her the suitcase for the trip, which was black, and she had seen the clothes Cecilia was going to take down south. There were 4 gray fleece garments for the cold. The thing is, this happened a week ago already, and it was confirmed days ago that the items found, the suitcase, the rings, and the pendant, were all Cecilia's belongings. And the clothes found along with all of this also belonged to her. Cecilia's own mother had seen her wearing those clothes shortly before she supposedly left on her trip. By mid-June, Cecilia's family had already held 3 marches demanding her return, and no one was giving any clear answers. In fact, even today, we still don't know. Not even the real motive for the crime. We can say a couple of things, we can try to come up with a hypothesis, but honestly, no one has yet said exactly why they did this to Cecilia. All we know is that there are too many crimes surrounding the lives of the Lucena family. Because of the amount of cash found in the Lucena house, a thorough investigation into the family's assets was launched. The lifting of tax secrecy covers Emerenciano Sena, Marcela Acuna, Cesar Sena, the Dr. Saul Andres Acuna Foundation, and the Emerenciano Limited Workers Cooperative. The foundation is an institution that was created by Emerenciano Sena himself to manage the receipt of provincial funds for housing construction. Once it was established, the organization signed its first agreement for housing construction with the Chaco Province Housing Institute, headed by accountant Valentin Benitez. The first transfers came from the Ministry of Education, which on December 23, 2010, sent the organization 23,208 pesos. For reference, the dollar at that time was trading at 3.94, which would be about 3 million pesos today if we use the blue rate. Since then, the foundation has received funds from the Provincial Housing Institute, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Public Health, the Chaco Lottery, the Institute of Family Agriculture and Popular Economy, and the Ministry of Social Development, among others, to carry out various projects. These include building homes in the Merenciano neighborhood, but also managing the health center. They also support Social Management School No. 2 in Resistencia. The current plan is to investigate the foundation, but not to shut down the projects they were running, so that the people who benefit from them are not affected. A few weeks ago, it made the news that Cesar, while in jail, decided to confess to Father Rafael, who already knew him and has a parish across from the police station. The news reported that he had broken down and was starting to talk about what happened. What Father Raphael first shared was that Cesar expressed clear anger toward his parents and even asked him if he would ever be able to forgive what they had done to him. According to the priest, Cesar is especially angry with his mother, Marcela Acuna. Gloria, Cecilia's mother, has come out to make it clear that she isn't asking for money. She's not asking for any money for all of this. And on the same topic, she spoke about her daughter's father, a man named Miguel, someone who hasn't been in their lives for 24 years. He hasn't had any contact with Cecilia or her sister, so it's not like he's the exemplary father he wants to make himself out to be. And Gloria doesn't want him to use her daughter's death to make money. What's going on? That Miguel has been appearing in the media over the past few weeks, giving interviews about the case, crying and all that. Which of course seems strange to the family, who already knew he didn't even provide money for food.
We need to show something. Put a little box so we can say, here is something from my baby. I think she looked like me, that she would jump for joy, she would happily walk around. She was absolutely everything to me.
Gloria spoke about Miguel in the following way. Cecilia's father isn't a father, he's just biological. In 24 years, he was never present, neither financially nor emotionally. He has a direct connection with the Sina family. He is under house arrest for money laundering. Don't give him any airtime. He's getting paid for those interviews. He's profiting from the death of a girl he never knew. According to the court case, Miguel Strzyzowski was one of the key players in a money laundering scheme that used the bank accounts of low-income people to bring dollars from Paraguay and exchange them for pesos at the blue market rate, from which he received a significant portion as payment. He did this between 2012 and 2015. When the account holders had to justify the source of the funds, they all pointed to the same place: cash loans from the financial company that Miguel Strzyzowski had in downtown Resistencia, Chaco. The courts detected a total of 79 million pesos in transactions, which at that time, around 2014, amounted to about $9.4 million. So for Gloria, this man definitely doesn't seem trustworthy at all. But above all, what you really had to watch out for was that this man is supposedly a friend of Marcela Acuna's sister, and they believe that's also the reason he decided to show up now. He's also the source of a WhatsApp chat with the story that Cesar's family had been spreading, the one where Cecilia supposedly ran off with a lover she had in Buenos Aires, a city she had never even been to. In this chat we have, Miguel messages Patricia Acuna, Marcela's sister, to ask her what's going on. And she replies saying, "Here, praying that this girl shows up so all these lies can finally end." We want to know who she really left with. In the same chat, Patricia asks him if the girl who went missing was related to him, to which Miguel replies that she was his oldest daughter. In other words, they're friends, but he never once mentioned his daughter, which clearly shows just how much Cecilia meant to him in his life. Patricia also tells him that the only thing the family knew was that they were separated, which was part of the story they wanted to spread, and was clearly a lie because Cesar and Cecilia had been living together for months. It's also not clear whether the whole family knew from the start, or if they really believed Cesar when he said he wasn't with Cecilia and that she had left on her own. We don't know to what extent the family knew from the beginning, what things they found out later, or who was fully on board with hiding it and keeping up the lie. We still don't know all of that for sure. For security reasons, there are some witnesses who remain anonymous in the case, but who have helped shed more light on this family's life, especially the relationship between Cesar and Cecilia. In October 2022, according to this person, whose account obviously needs to be taken with a grain of salt, Cecilia told them she had to divorce Cesar because of an issue with the young man's inheritance. It seems she also talked about the possibility that there was violence between Cesar and his mother Marcela, and that she, Cecilia, clearly didn't want to be with someone like that, considering what could happen to her if Cesar was already hitting his own mother. It's at this point as well that the witness reveals Cesar was taking pills, because he's a psychiatric patient, which doesn't mean he's going to get away with any of this, just that it's something Cecilia apparently mentioned as part of his fits of rage. Sometimes Cesar would stop taking his prescribed medication and would become violent. All of this, again, comes from the anonymous testimony.
When it comes to these matters, you decide what you're going to do, who you're going to support, on top of everything else. And I told her, and she said, poor Patricia, I don't know what, because supposedly the old lady, the one who killed her, went too far, tried to strangle her, and killed Marcella. It seems like they're trying to pin it all on that Patricia, according to Lucy. These people have no scruples about what they did, I told her. They're savages, and it can't be the first time, Lucy, I told her. Anita told me whole families disappear from the Merenciano neighborhood. Whole families vanish. They do the same thing to them. They make them disappear. I don't know what. And I said, well, all the more reason, I told her.
From the very beginning of the case, the young woman's family has tried to bring it to light, which happened, and now the whole country is waiting for it to be solved. What I actually wanted to mention was what they think about what's happening right now. Juana Reguin, the family's former lawyer, said that they point to Marcela Acuna as the perpetrator of the crime. In other words, they believe or believed that she killed her to get her out of the way. That was the first thing they thought, that she was the main one, because of course, they knew she didn't like Cecilia at all, who in fact paid her to break up with her son. As for the current defense, Fernando Burlando will handle the case on behalf of Cecilia Strzyzowski's family. The Sena family, for their part, requested that Emerenciano remain under house arrest due to health issues related to his diabetes. The biggest problem with this, actually, is that they wanted him to spend the time until the trial at his house, which happens to be the last place Cecilia was seen. Of course, they can't let him do that. Especially since, when they searched the house again, they found more blood. These new traces of blood were found in the room the couple shared. And thanks to that, it was concluded that this could be the place where Cecilia was strangled. At least, that's the prosecution's most recent theory. What still isn't clear is who played what role in all of this. We can go by the prosecution's theory and say that Cesar lured Cecilia to his parents' house under false pretenses and killed her there, making this a premeditated crime, and that afterward his parents or Marcela took care of covering it up. Because if we go with the theory Cecilia's mother had at first, that Marcelo wanted to get rid of Cecilia, it doesn't make as much sense anymore. It's a crime that, from the way it looks, was planned. But I have to assume that no one with years of experience in politics, and on top of that being a lawyer, would go and commit a crime like this in their own home. The reality is that she would be very stupid, although not impossible. The biggest question lies in what the real, complete timeline is. Whether or not they used the shredder to get rid of the body, and who is directly involved in the crime or its cover-up. Cesar would have killed Cecilia at his parents' house on June 2nd. From there, his mother would find out, and together with Obregon, his driver, they would cover up the crime one way or another. Obregon's wife would be one of the people who also saw the body, and was assigned the job of cleaning up the crime scene. Griselda and Gustavo, the caretakers, the ones who looked after the place, are people who might be involved mainly in the cover-up, because Cesar asked them for a shovel to gather the ashes, given how conveniently located they were, since they could have been the ones in charge of keeping the fire going, burning for days, which incinerated the woman's remains. On top of that, in any case, the first thing Gustavo said was that Cecilia's remains were in a garbage dump, which sent the investigation in the wrong direction, lying, which is another crime. Later, he said that a lawyer sent by the Sena family had forced him to lie, and that's why he did it. What they supposedly told him was, "You don't say anything, or else you're next." Cecilia's family no longer expects to find her alive. Rather, they just want to be told where her remains are, so they can finally mourn. And, well, we've reached the end of the video. This is all the information there is so far. Of course, there will be more updates. Like I said, you can follow me on Instagram because that's probably where I'll be sharing the most updates about what's happening. For now, a trial is expected, and it's anticipated that they will remain in jail until then. They're still analyzing exactly where Cecilia was left and whether there were previous cases related to this family before hers. So that's all for today. Goodbye.